Good afternoon. I'm Venki Ramakrishnan, the President of the Royal Society, which is the independent science academy of the UK. Thank you for joining me in this international event where I will be speaking to Antoine Petit, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique, or CNRS as we call it, and Professor Martin Stratman, the President of the Max Planck Society. And the theme of this event is on making Europe a leader in artificial intelligence. During this discussion, we will have contributions from some AI specialists and end with some questions from the audience. As a self-governing international fellowship, the Royal Society is committed to fostering international collaboration and convening colleagues from around Europe to discuss a global issue like AI really underscores the importance and necessity of cross-border and international collaboration to exploring new ideas, testing theories, and comparing and contrasting different scientific perspectives. Currently, the dominant players in the development of AI and digital technologies are the US and China, and it is often said that Europe plays a minor role. However, there are several examples of really groundbreaking and revolutionary digital innovations that came out of Europe. For example, Europe invented the World Wide Web, which actually gave the internet its power and reach and really drove an explosive growth of the internet. It was initially developed for the exchange of information between physicists at CERN, but then it was developed and scaled in the US. And it also shows you how discoveries made in one context can have really broad applications that are not entirely anticipated. Europe also pioneered multimedia communication platforms. We all know about Skype. Skype was actually created, the technology underpinning Skype was created in a collaboration between computer scientists in Sweden, Denmark, and Estonia. The World Wide Web, and indeed much of the internet, is actually driven by servers that run under the Linux operating system. And Linux itself was created by Finland's Linus Torvalds. So another example of European contributions that have revolutionized the growth of the internet and computer technology. And Europe is also at the leading edge of developing the hardware supporting advances, including advances in AI. And it's for that reason that NVIDIA, which produces the graphics chips that run a lot of the machines for AI, is actually acquiring the UK-based chip designer ARM for $40 billion. I should point out the UK is home to many cutting-edge startups that are much sought after. For example, DeepMind, founded by Demis Hassabis, who's a fellow of the Royal Society, is a good example of a highly innovative European AI startup that grew and attracted the interest of tech giants. And it is now, of course, a part of Google, although a fairly autonomous part, I should add, and still based in London. Another area where Europe has shown leadership is the governance of the use of data and AI. The use of data and AI has a number of problems, both ethical and questions of privacy and security. And Europe has pioneered bold regulatory frameworks that can influence the use of data and AI. While data is global, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, has shown it is possible to legislate technologies at the territorial level. GDPR has inspired changes around the world. California followed suit, and large technology companies have increased their focus on protecting privacy. tech giants are looking to Europe to clarify the rules of the game and companies' responsibilities. Regulation can often be seen as a brake on innovation, but done well, it can actually boost the development of ethical and trustworthy technologies and approaches, and in fact, enhance innovation. For example, technologies known as privacy-enhancing technologies, or PETs, could be further developed and help use data and AI safely. So Europe has an opportunity to spearhead the development and use of such technologies, and indeed to set standards which could be important for the future. Governance is not just about regulation. A number of European countries have set up commissions to scrutinize the ethics of data use and AI. And for example, recommendations from the Royal Society and British Academy review on data management and use governance in the 21st century led to the creation of the UK government's Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation. One of the roles of such stewardship bodies is to ensure that data-driven technologies are developed and deployed in a way that works for everyone. Across Europe, there are examples of how public debates about the place of science in society can shape the development of research. A well-founded public debate based on continued engagement between AI research and the public will be important in shaping the development of AI technologies. To sum up, clearly Europe is capable of producing cutting-edge innovation. It has done that in the past several decades, and it will continue to do so in AI, and as well as playing a leading role in shaping public debates and policy. A major challenge in Europe now is to ensure that it not only develops technology, but allows the growth and the scale of technology. In other words, scaling it up to reach sort of global levels of impact. In the first part of this event, I'm going to invite Antoine Petit and Martin Stratman to provide some opening remarks. And I'd be especially interested in hearing their views on the following questions. How competitive is Europe in AI research and innovation? And what are Europe's strengths? The Royal Society conducted a number of studies on the benefits and levels of uptake of AI and data science, and found that data is a key challenge for the UK to realize the potential of AI. We have also found significant growth in demand for skilled data scientists. Have CNRS and Max Planck found the same in France and Germany? Or what are Europe's weaknesses in AI and how can we address this? Work by the Royal Society, the Leopoldina, and ALEA, the network of all European academies, and by others has identified that Europe is in a unique position to lead on the development of trusted and ethical AI. How has Europe demonstrated leadership in this area so far, and what could it do further? AI is said to have the potential to tackle major societal challenges, such as climate change, the response to the COVID pandemic, or broader implications for healthcare. How are our political leaders defining their ambitions for AI across Europe? And how can we as the science community inform these ambitions? We face a number of challenges at the moment: the pandemic, broader political issues such as the future relationship between the between the UK and the EU, as well as between us and the US and the Asia and the rest of the world. At the same time, the EU is concluding discussions on the next research program, Horizon Europe. Given these challenges, how can we work together to make Europe a leading destination for AI? What do we need to see in terms of researcher mobility, regulation, and funding to facilitate this? So I'd now like to hand over to Antoine Petit, the chairman and Chief Executive Officer of CNRS, and a computer scientist himself. So over to you, Antoine.
Thank you very much, Venki. It's really a pleasure to share this event with you. I am convinced that we are only in the infancy of AI, if I can say, and so that almost everything remains to be invented. But of course, the race has started, and the question is whether the European countries, as you mentioned, or even better, whether Europe has a chance to win it. And the race is not closed, clearly, but we have to make an effort right now. And to be a leader, or one of the leaders, I think that several ingredients, in some sense, are needed. I would like to mention 5 of them, which appear to me as the most important. First of one, and I will then comment, but briefly the list. First of one is the question of data that you mentioned already. The second one is the question of the computing power. The third one is a question of skills and talents, and in fact, human intelligence. But the fourth one is also the problem of the relations with private sectors. And last but not least, the fifth one is the question of the acceptability, and it goes back to trust and fairness, as you mentioned. Concerning data, you said that data is a big challenge for UK. From my point of view, data is a big challenge for Europe. And I want to include UK in Europe, of course. I mean by that I think that each of our country, in fact, is too small to deal with only its own data, and that we have to share. Perhaps we have even sometimes to share at the international level, and the recent crisis shows that probably we should have shared more, even with our China partners and American partners. But at least in Europe, we have to make an effort. And I know that it's not easy. If I look at the example of France, even inside France, we have sometimes to share data. And so it's clearly an issue. And it's, of course, very important that this data are cross-referencing as much as possible. And we all know that GAFA and their Asian counterparts have already a lot of data, but nevertheless, I think that we still have to work on that subject. Also on data between business to business data, and the 5G revolution will produce again more data, but clearly for me something that we should share at the European level. The second point concerning computing power, I will be very fast because I have the impression, perhaps wrong, but I don't think that it's not the main problem right now in Europe. The third one is very important. It concerns human intelligence, and you mentioned already this question of talents. I think if we want to have a strong Europe, we need to have people educated in AI at different levels. We need of course a PhD laureate and PhD so we need to have education at the PhD level, but we also clearly need graduates and undergraduates, specialists of data and AI to work in industry. So that's clearly a question of education. So what we could do as a European level, I think we have to make an effort to attract and to retain talents. We all know that the competition is worldwide. And for instance, I am in the board who is in charge to look at the chairs of AI in Canada. And they have decided to have 60 such chairs until now, and half of them come from outside Canada with really outstanding profile. And that's something we should push at the European level, perhaps using tools like the ERC, which is so important for Europe. But clearly, it's an issue. And we have to be optimistic in the sense that a lot of AI is based on mathematics and computer science, as we all know. And these two domains are clearly domains in which Europe has already, for always very good performance at the international level. But it's also important, I think, that we push to have AI and other sciences. As you said, I'm CEO of CNRS. CNRS covers all fields of science, and I am very impressed by the first results of AI applied to other subjects, for instance, chemistry and AI, or the questions of data in astrophysics or particle physics. It's really rich, amazing new techniques, and so we need talents and human resources, of course, in AI, in pure AI, if I can say, but we need also people with some kind of double competencies in AI and in another field. So the fourth condition, from my point of view, is what I will call the private ecosystem and its relations with academic world. So it's a problem in Europe. We do not have very big players, as it has already been mentioned. So we have quite promising startups, but one of the problems, as you said, Venki, is very often these startups are, after some years or some months even, they are bought by American or Asian capital, and which is not so bad, but unfortunately the converse is not true, and so that creates an unbalanced situation, which is not from my point of view very good. But we have big companies in Europe. And I think that one issue is that these big companies must make the AI gamble. And I'm not sure that all of them did it already. And because clearly this AI gamble is not an evolution, but clearly a revolution. And this revolution requires agility and questioning. And that's not so clear that a lot of big existing companies are able to do that now. And we have also to develop interactions between private sector and academic world. I was mentioning the Canadian shares, and I am very impressed by the fact that almost all our colleagues, most distinguished colleagues, have some kind of double appointment between a Canadian university and a big American company. And this is a system which does not really exist, at least in France. And with also, it's a system with some drawbacks, clearly, but I think that we have to think to that. It clearly facilitates the interactions between private sector and academic world. And so, and last but not least, I would like to as you said, Venki, to insist on the fact that the question of acceptability for society is a key issue. And from my point of view, this includes the question of fairness, of explainability, of ethics. And from a scientific point of view, it means that we have to also to deal with humanities and social sciences. So of course, AI is clearly a lot of mathematics, a lot of computer science. But the question of acceptability, of explainability, require to have also specialists of humanities and social science, which will help us also to understand, in some sense, the behavior of people. I mean by that when you see a doctor and if he gives you a diagnosis, few people, in fact, will ask questions about why this diagnosis. But when an AI-based algorithms propose a diagnosis, it's very different. People require explanation. It's normal, but it's interesting to see why in some situations you need explanations, and why in some other situations you don't need this explanations. If you take a plane, for instance, we know that a plane is driven now not by the pilot, by a computer, and nobody cares. And so you don't ask any explanation when you go to a plane. And if with AI, the situation is very different, and we saw it in particular in France with the application called Stop COVID, which has not been accepted by the population. And so the question of ethics and seems, from my point of view, absolutely crucial. it's important to mention that we do not have the same ethics than American people or China people, and their ethics is not better or worse than ours, but it's different. But I think that in Europe, more or less, we share some kind of same ethics. And so probably we have to pay attention to this. And as you said, Venki, perhaps it's this ethics AI, which is the field or the domain in which Europe could take some kind of leadership, or at least to not let the leadership to China or Asian countries and America. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antoine. Those were very insightful remarks. And I'd now like to welcome Martin Stratman, and if you could give us your perspective on AI in Europe.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for inviting me today for this meeting. I'm a chemist by education, so I'm not a specialist of the field, but I might try my best to give an input to the discussion of today, also as part of my activities as president of Max Planck Society. I would like to spend a few minutes in the very beginning on the science or the situation of the science in Europe in general, and then I would like to focus on today's topic. Let me start with a few comments on the general situation of the science landscape in Europe. I think Europe these days faces a number of challenges. Some of them are specific for Europe, others are of more general nature. We all face the immediate consequence of climate change. We see a new kind of industrial, and I would even call it post-industrial revolution, which will transform major parts of European industry, and AI is part of this. We just experienced a pandemic, which already today dramatically accelerates this transformation process, giving a boost to digital processes and business. And obviously, digital industries like online retail, for example, is on the winning side. And last but not least, as a specific topic, we have the impact of Brexit, which may, unfortunately, if it runs unfortunately, in the end, come up with additional borders in Europe and affect also the industrial performance of Europe in general. We all know, I think with the exception of Brexit, that all the issues I mentioned before can only be dealt with by science. And science is not only a toolbox, I mean a toolbox to handle specific immediate problems, but science serves as an underlying fundament of knowledge as basis for decision-making processes. And as such, I think science is of fundamental importance for the well-being of European countries and its citizens. Now, how about the status of science in Europe? If you just compare the worldwide top 1% articles and reviews, so the top papers which are going to be published, the EU 28, which includes, of course, Britain, is on par with the US. And I think that's not bad at all. And if you just see the Nobel Prizes which are given, again, Europe is very much on par with Great Britain. What is behind these numbers? I think behind these numbers are two aspects. First of all, there's great science being done in individual institutions in Europe. But in addition, we have what we call intergovernmental agencies, which stand for the highest reputation in science. I come to this later also in the aspect of AI. We have CERN, for example, particle physics. We have the ESO, the Southern Observatory for Astrophysics, the ESA for space science, and the EMBL for molecular biology. We have European-based large scientific infrastructures, the S3 roadmap. We have European grants, which support excellence in science, the RSC. We have guaranteed mobility in Europe. I would like to mention the Marie Curie program, which is based on common social security standards. And of course, we have very strong collaboration among scientists, which is strongly supported by the European Science Program, the framework program, including also widening aspects. So much has been achieved in the past, but there are some pressing issues which you also have to solve. And among them is that, to my feeling, the science and innovation budget within the European framework is too small. We will see that will also affect AI. The scientific performance gap between East and West and North and South sometimes hinders common agendas. And of course, the Brexit poses a threat to the European coherence also in science. AI is one example. I think why splitting up Europe is a really dangerous process. We know that international competition is fierce, and each country in Europe on its own would be much less competitive in comparison to the US or China. Second, AI-based business depends, to the best of my knowledge, strongly on scaling. And I think we will only be competitive on a European level, not as individual entities. And last but not least, data are essential for AI. And to me, it's obvious, and you have mentioned this also before, that Europe will have to provide a safe data space for industry and science as one cornerstone of future AI. Now, let me have some words on today's focus on AI on itself. To me, AI is a fascinating field of science, that's first, but it has also an enormous impact on our economy. AI and related technologies will boost and I feel transform our economy. Many jobs will be lost, and people feel it already, but many new ones will be created. I just would like to mention the human-robot collaboration, some call it cobots, is on the rise, and Europe should not miss out to profit from this kind of new steam engine that is AI. I think this process will be transformative for a major part of our successful European industry. Now, to fulfill the promise, and as one example, also to stimulate the strong European robotics sector, it's only one example, and Japan and Europe are the key players in this market, it will be essential to transfer the strengths in industrial robotics into the AI age. And I think it's only one example, and we all know that China is gaining ground. But of course, AI technology not only brings genuine product innovation to the robotics sector and make robotic users, let me say, more efficient, it also makes possible the rise of completely new type of companies that provide platform technologies which are applicable across very many different sectors. And I feel that's one conclusion I have, that in sectors where Europe is really strong, there is real potential. Just think of the energy sector, the chemical industry, the catalysis development or the development of new catalysts, health. All these big items are much more complex, let me say, than just search engines as we can see them. And I think that here the future is still open, and AI will play a major role, and Europe may have a major say in these fields. For all of this, to me, it's obvious that top research is needed. And that's, I think, my core message. Platforms spanning core tech and innovative robots, for example, basically arise directly from the best science as it's being done in the best academic institutions and their spin-offs. And at the heart of all of this is people. People who advance modern AI, for example, like machine learning. I think that we all agree on this, such people are the breeding ground for all living AI ecosystems. They virtually open up spaces of possibilities which others can then explore more deeply in science and also in industry. So to me, it's obvious that a strong and vital European research community is absolutely vital for providing these kinds of people. And so we also may ask, what is the situation? And you asked this, Venki, what is the situation of AI in Europe? Now, we can have different statistics on this. I recently had a glance on the OECD database, and then you get an idea where the top AI science comes from, based, for example, on an analysis of the top 1% of conference contribution in this field. And you can see at the moment that Europe is actually more or less on par with China, but China is showing fast speed and fast increase in their publications. The EU 27 are even better off in terms, for example, of top 1% journal articles or top 1% patents. But at the moment, the US still plays in a completely different league than all the others. And so there's lots of room for us to improve. But we also have to keep in mind, we are not lost. We do have strong research sites in all our European countries, in France, for example, the UK or Germany, and many others. In France, we have INRIA, we have the CNRS, we have the École Normale Supérieure as really strong players. Paris is certainly the biggest hub in France. Also, if you take the campuses in the southwest into consideration, University Paris-Saclay, for example. In Germany, the Max Planck Society has strong activities in AI, particularly in Tübingen and Stuttgart. Other sites are Munich, the Technical University of Munich, or Berlin. In UK, many sites, Oxford, Cambridge, London, Edinburgh. And overall in Europe, we have Zurich, Amsterdam, and many, many places more. So in a nutshell, Europe has a lot to offer, even in the field of AI, but competition is fierce, and Europe is lagging behind top sites, for example, in comparison to the US. And in particular, Europe does not have companies like Google, Amazon, and so on. And so my conclusion is we should not and we cannot just copy US strategies to be successful. We have to come up with our own European concepts, views, and visions. Now, what to do? First of all, people. We have to support and attract truly outstanding, brilliant individuals. I think that's the core, that's the nucleus. To this, to me, the ERC program of the European community is essential. And for that reason, I'm worried that really this program is financially stepping down. We should increase this program. We should make it much more efficient. We have many more people who would like to join European science sites, in particular as these days the US is not doing that well. We need also excellent theoretical training in math and computer science, also that has been mentioned. And here Eastern Europe has a lot to offer because math for them was always extremely important. So people is one thing. The second element is networks. We must create a stable and powerful network with our existing outstanding institutions, the ones I mentioned before. And I think that has to be done bottom up. And probably, and that we may discuss, probably it can only be achieved in parallel, not in part, but in parallel to the EU framework program. Since regional funding must not play a role here, we only should look for excellence here. And other funding programs, for example, the goal of other funding programs is also to support, let me say, parts of Europe which are not doing that well. We call this the widening programs. But here, I think we should really concentrate on outstanding institutions which do exist, which have a track record in AI. I think if we fail, or I think we will fail, if we mix up individual regional interests with the aim of identifying and promoting strong partners. Now, how can we do so? Forming these kind of functioning networks. I think Europe has success stories in this field to offer. And one is the EMBL. We all know how to get this working. We have seen this. We know how the EMBL works, the EMBL, and we know that that's a highly successful structure. For me in the field, and this is my personal view, for me in the field of AI and machine learning, the ALICE initiative, a European network of excellence, which is based on top-notch fundamental science, is a real chance here. Only those who belong to the top groups in Europe can join this initiative. We should promote ALICE at a European level through a treaty between governments. So my conclusion is, let's transform the ALICE initiative to some kind of modern EMBL focusing on basic science in Europe in the field of AI. And I have to say, I'm really impressed by the speed the ALICE initiative has taken off recently. I think these days nearly 30 units have joined this initiative. So the first was people, the second was networks. The third one, I think, is infrastructures. I feel that we need a dedicated computer infrastructure in Europe as support for European AI. And I personally also feel that looking at the intermediate and long-term timelines, quantum computing is of real interest. So I would say that at the moment that AI and quantum computing, if we are able to couple this in the years to come, could be a real game changer. Europe has a lot to offer here, and it's a real chance for Europe, which we should not miss, to bring these two different fields together. We also have to ensure the availability of data. We have mentioned this before. Data in Europe come from science, they come from industrial partners, they come from medicine. For example, Gaia X is one step in that direction. So as a huge advantage, I see that we can and should combine hardware and software in Europe. That's also very specific. AI and smart robotics, for example. We have beautiful industries in the hardware field, and we should combine this with modern software. Now, coming to an end, I think we have no time to lose. We have really to act. Otherwise, I think we will lose against institutions, for example, in the US. And according to the best of my knowledge, the most famous or the best performing computer science place in Europe is the ETH these days, and it ranks only on place 28 on the world list, if I'm correct. So I think there's really lots of things to do. My recommendation: first, have a clear focus on proven excellence, to concentrate on this and do not dilute things. Second, concentrate on future aspects of AI, machine learning, explainable AI, self-supervised learning, etc., etc. Third, work hard on bottlenecks such as hardware and real-world data. Fourth, expand and strengthen ALICE as an intergovernmental institution so that Europe as a whole becomes competitive. And last but not least, make sure that AI made in Europe is a superior offer to people and companies in ensuring that it's based on clear standards, trust, transparency, and also, as has been mentioned, obvious ethical standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you both for your very insightful comments. Before I ask some of our other contributors, I just want to say I very much agree with the importance of trying to manage data on a Europe-wide scale rather than in a fragmented way, and the importance of building institutions on a Europe-wide scale and infrastructure on a Europe-wide scale, because I fear that's the only way that we'll be able to compete in the global market. And you mentioned the US and China. One thing I might say is that China today is not where China will be in 5 years. In terms of its trajectory, China is actually accelerating enormously. And part of the reason is that data availability in China is different from data availability here, et cetera. Now, of course, we would not necessarily want to copy that sort of model. And I think Europe offers a kind of its own unique way on access to data while preserving appropriate safeguards. And as you say, producing a superior quality of AI that can be trusted, that's transparent, etc. So thank you both for your comments. So I'd now like to invite Marta Fiatkovska, who's a professor of computing systems at the University of Oxford. So Marta, we welcome your comments at this point.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Venki, for this introduction into my question. Algorithmic decision-making is at the heart of AI, but we have seen a fair share of successes, but also, unfortunately, some well-publicized failures. We've seen security risks, privacy leaks, poor implementation of decisions, unfairness, etc. Now, at the same time, algorithmic decision-making heavily depends on data being widely available and across borders, but also protected. Nobody wants to see their job applications or medical records leaked to the internet. Well-publicized failures, unfortunately, affect acceptance of the technology by the public. And the agreement to release data for general use. And this creates a negative feedback loop. So my questions are, what are the main challenges in ensuring data sharing, data availability, including across borders, and consequently acceptance of algorithmic decision making by the general public? How can they be overcome? And does Europe have an advantage? And if so, what is it? In particular, is GDPR such an advantage?
perhaps I can quickly respond before going to the others. I think Europe does have an advantage because it has always had a good framework for regulation and trying to balance regulation with the growth of businesses and while supporting business. And the GDPR is just one example of that. But you've also seen in many cases, the EU has acted decisively to break up monopolies. We saw that with Microsoft earlier, with Google, and this is going to be an increasing problem. And so I think Europe offers what I would call a well-regulated marketplace where ethical principles and privacy are considered more important than perhaps in other parts of the world. But perhaps one of the two others would like to answer. Antoine, would you like to go first?
Yes, with pleasure. You're a bit optimistic from my point of view, Venki. I think that regulation is good, but sometimes it can be also something which is not so good. I mean by that to share data is, as I said at the very beginning, it's very important. And sometimes I'm sorry to say that I think that we have too many regulations. And so I think we have to find a good balance, because if we had no regulations, of course, people will have not any trust in AI and in labs using AIs, and that's not possible, of course, in a democracy like Europe. But on the other way, I think that if we let the floors to lawyers, and then the race will be finished, and we will have not decided exactly what is accepted or not. And if I look at the example of GDPR, it's quite a good example, because I think at the very beginning, it was also in order to put some limitations on big companies. And now it's sometimes more annoying for even for public labs than for large companies. So I think it's a very, very difficult question, Marta, but of course a very good question. And I think that the key point would be to find a good balance. And it means that at the European level, we have the decision, the people who take the decision have to understand in some sense that the share of data is very important. So regulation, yes, but we have to go fast.
Thank you, Antoine. Martin, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, two comments mainly. First of all, this is, of course, in the core of what we discussed. I think the trust of data. I think at the moment we see a situation where all these data mainly belong to a few companies. They have a kind of monopole structure. They use this data for their own business models, get extremely wealthy due to the usage of data. And there's, of course, a lack of trust of many in the population, let me say, on the data being gathered and being used, let me say, by the big tech companies we see these days. I give you one example for a huge data set, which I found absolutely amazing. And this is the Danish Biodata Center. In the Danish Biodata Center, all the Danish people from their birth on, they have a number, and all the biodata are being stored there, including, by the way, like physical data, I mean, blood samples, etc. Like this. So all the tests you undergo in your life in whole Denmark are being stored in one place. Highly valuable data, I have to say. Now, how is this possible? It's possible there is obviously a trust between the population and the government that this is not misused. Second, there are strong regulations how to use this data space, because otherwise it would be a total mess. And you could imagine that if you think in modern, let me say, drug therapies, it's a huge data space you can use, because the therapies and blood samples and all this stuff is included for millions and millions and millions of people. What I'm saying, but this trust is first important. So we have to work very hard on trustful data storage. And I know that in some states, like in the northern parts of Europe, Denmark, Sweden, this trust does exist. In some other states, it does not exist. But we also have to know in the United States, it doesn't exist at all. So we have an advantage, I think, with respect to the United States. I think China, I don't think the population has any trust in what is going on there. The second element I want to mention, in Germany, we have not developed what we call a national data infrastructure for science. So more and more, I think all the scientific data are pooled. Again, it's a trustful data space, highly valuable data. Again, it's a system which is trustful because it's, let me say, enclosed also by rules and regulations. So some rules and regulations you have to have, otherwise you do not put all your science data in a common data space, and I think that has to expand in Europe. And third, and that is a consequence of the competition the companies experience. There has a project between Germany and France, which is called Gaia X, which is a data storage room for industry. Again, I think German and French, and I feel all the others, they all see that they lose competitive edge with respect to the US. So they have to team up. They are competing, let me say, in certain fields. So they have to have a trustful data space. And Gaia X is one of these attempts to achieve this. So I see these things to happen. And they happen because Europe feels that they have to do something in this data space, and they cannot just rely on what is going in the US. So I think this combination of regulation, trustful governments, which I think are essential, can be a nucleus, let me say, of European sovereignty in data. The data are there, of course, in Europe, and we should not lose them all to the US or to any other state.
Thank you very much, Martin. So I'd now like to introduce Stéphane Malat, an academician and professor at the Collège de France. And so welcome, and we look forward to your comments.
Thank you very much, Venki. So I would like to make comments first about fundamental research in AI and ask a question which is probably the most difficult one concerning talents and European sovereignty. So I think it's important to first realize that what limits applicability of AI and machine learning in industry is not just technology. It has been mentioned, but I would like to emphasize it's also about fiability, robustness, biases, explicability. And the reason why these problems are so difficult is that fundamentally we don't understand how these machines, how these algorithms works in the sense that we don't understand the mathematics. And there are fundamental pluridisciplinary issues. Basically, the problems are in some sense quite similar to physics, where you have billions of interacting variables provided by measurements, and you are extracting some macroscopic measurements, decisions. And these processes, which are similar in material sciences or statistical physics, are not understood. And so I would like here to emphasize what has been said before. Fundamental research at that stage of AI is very important. And we can only, I think, go forward and support ERC, which there, I think, have been absolutely great for research in Europe in that domain. Now, the most difficult problem where I would like to ask the questions concerns talents and sovereignty. So in France, we have great startups, very lively dynamics, but as it has also been mentioned for England, they are being bought, and in particular by US and Asian companies. So what's different from the other sectors, like the one mentioned by Martin concerning mechanics, chemistry, and so on? It's the situation, we have to say it, of industrial domination. There is a brain drain, but this brain drain is not towards the US. The brain drain is really towards the GAFAM lab. For example, there are many in Paris and in France. Of course, Huawei is also installing 2 labs now in Paris. And these are great research labs with computational facilities, data availability, top researchers with excellent salaries. There, I think that we really need a European position to understand how to tackle these issues relatively to US and of course, China. And I'd like to spend 1 minute to explain the difficulties. It's important, I think, to understand the mechanics or the mechanism of what's happening. So these GAFAM companies and some Asians attract really the best talents. And the reason is simple. The salary is essentially a factor 5. And that creates deficit for public research, for teaching. And of course, as it was mentioned by Antoine, teaching, and I believe it is extremely important now for educating the next generation to this technology. But it's also a deficit for the European large companies, which have a real difficulty to hire the best researchers in this near monopolistic situation. Now, these companies have presence in all European institutions and universities. They all need money, computing powers, and they compete between themselves to get it. So, of course, we all need this money for carrying our research. And there is a consequence of that, is that, of course, very good students, prestigious image they obtain out of that. And I must say also, very strong research link. It's your friends, my colleagues are in these great research labs. How can I say no to collaborate, even if they pay some of the grants? Even refusing would be insulting. So the situation, I think, is interesting if we take, for example, ELIS, which I believe is an absolutely great initiative, and I'm sure Nuria will speak about it. But if you look at the first page of ELIS, the first support comes from Google, James Dean, which says it's great, and is also saying that AI is the biggest growth factor financially for Google. Then comes, as a support, Facebook, then comes Amazon, then comes Qualcomm. The difficulties are great, and I understand perfectly why ELIS did that in the same way that all these labs do it. And what I'm afraid is that in time of COVID, where a lot of companies have difficulty, European companies, and where these companies are on the other side growing very strongly, the situation is probably going to be even more difficult. So my questions is for this great research institution that you are representing, how do you think we can deal with it? And again, I think we need to deal with it at a European level. Individual, we can't resist. Local institution can't resist. What do you think can be done?
Thank you very much, Stefan, for those remarks and your questions. I notice we're quite a bit behind time. So what I would like to do is invite Nuria Oliver to also add her comments, and then we can perhaps respond to both of you together. Thank you, Nuria.
Thank you, Venki. Oh, that's great, because I wanted to answer to Stefan's last comment. So just a clarification, on the ELIS website, we have a few tens of supporting entities, institutions, and none of them doesn't mean that they provide financial support. It just means that they actually support the vision for ELIS. So just because I thought maybe there was a confusion whether they were sponsoring ELIS in any way. We have another program, which is the sponsoring program. But anyways, it's a pleasure to be here. And as it has already been mentioned, I am here representing ELIS, which is the European Laboratory for Learning and Intelligence Systems. And I think it resonates with a lot of the comments that have been made so far. So ELIS is a European AI network of excellence, and it focuses on fundamental research, on technical innovation, and on having positive societal and economic impact through modern AI. And what we call by modern AI is the approach to build artificial intelligence that is data-driven, based on bottom-up methods having machine learning at its core. So we've talked a lot about data, and the AI methods that are trained with these massive amounts of data are sort of like the methods within this modern AI field. So the main characteristics is, in a similar way to human intelligence, these learning approaches to AI don't need to be explicitly programmed, but they are constantly learning from experience, not learning from data. And as Venki explained in the introduction, a lot of the fundamental ideas, not only in computer science, more broadly speaking, but also in this field, were developed in Europe and were developed by European researchers. But as everyone has mentioned, Europe is facing very serious challenges when it comes to attracting, retaining, and also nurturing the next generation of excellent talent to work for European institutions. But I completely agree with Stefan's comment. It's not just even working in Europe. is actually working for European institutions, because the big Asian and North American companies which dominate AI right now, they all have excellent research labs in Europe. So you don't have to leave Europe, but you're not working for a European institution. ELIS, as Martin mentioned, is a grassroots initiative, and it's trying to address these challenges with a 3-pillar strategy, which the main goal is to contribute to achieving what we all agree upon, I think, which is European technological sovereignty in AI. So what are the 3 pillars? And they're very aligned with what has been mentioned. So we focus a lot on basically talent and infrastructures. So we want to invest in existing talent, which we call fellows, which will be excellent researchers in machine learning and related areas. We also want to foster new talent, and that will be through the students. And then, as has been mentioned, we want to build a network of outstanding European ecosystems, which we call sites. So I'll just very quickly explain the 3 pillars and then go with my questions. So on the fellows side of things, we established a year and a few months ago a wide range of fellow research programs, which are devoted to all sorts of topics, from more theoretical machine learning to applications of machine learning to health or climate sciences, or human-centric elements of AI. The second pillar is basically about attracting and inspiring and connecting the best PhD students in Europe through the ELIS PhD program. And the last pillar consists of the creation of a network of ELIS sites that are located at leading existing institutions, or we have a couple examples of maybe sites created from scratch, and all of them perform competitive modern AI across Europe and Israel with economic and social positive impact. An ELIS unit has to commit to invest at least 1.5 million euro per year for at least 5 years, requires a commitment to excellence through international peer review, and also a contribution to the network towards supporting network activities like hosting exchange students or faculty, leading and creating research programs, organizing workshops, etc. Beyond this scientific excellence, and I wanted to mention this because it's been brought up in the discussion, the ELIS units encourage its members to have fluid relationships with industry, with the European industry, to spin off companies. We also ask every unit to develop a diversity strategy, which hasn't been mentioned yet, but is one of the big challenges, and also to carry outreach and education actions, because it's fundamental to build trust in AI and also to attract the new generations to this field. We have a huge lack of young talent. The official launch of the first 30 ELIS units took place on September 15th, and they include most of the best research centers in Europe in AI, including 4 right now from the UK, in Cambridge, Oxford, UCL, and Edinburgh. And the overall commitment is above 50 million euro of their own funding per year for at least 5 years. And this is what we've done. And I think this is great progress, but I think more needs to be done. And I think it needs to be done now. And that's why we also drafted a call for action. And this is a little bit where my question is going. We believe that Europe has an opportunity to contribute to the AI field with a European sort of like flavor. We believe that we need, for our own survival, to be producers, inventors, creators of AI, rather than just consumers of the AI that has been created by others, namely by North America and Asia. And we firmly believe that the kind of AI that we can create in Europe will be different from what is being created right now in North America and Asia, probably more aligned with our values and really focused on ensuring progress. And to me, progress means the improvement of the quality of life of people, of all people, not just some people, and also the rest of biological beings and the planet itself. So my question is, we have this initiative that Martin has highlighted as an initiative having great potential, ELIS. So I would love to hear your vision, your opinion on how do we take the next steps in ELIS, and how do we get the governments and pan-European institutions to work together in achieving this vision? What do you think would be the most effective and the most efficient way to be able to realize this Ellis vision, given at the same time the sense of urgency that we have, and also given the diversity that characterizes Europe? So that's my question.
Thank you very much, Nuria, for those remarks and the questions. We have one other question from one of the audience, and that is that AI will automate a lot of jobs. And the question is, you know, what can be done? Eventually there will be new jobs, but there will be a long transition period where people need to be retrained. And the question is, what can we do in that respect? And a second related question is that we're focused on AI talent, but this is mostly at the university and postgraduate level. But there's quite a lot of use of AI that can be done at the technical level. And so what can we do about technical education? So that sort of summarizes the questions from Stefan and Nuria and from the Ben Upton from the audience. And perhaps, Martin, could you go first?
Yeah, I can do so. I try to be brief. First of all, my view is to transform Alice into what I would call an intergovernmental agency, similar like the EMBL structure. The advantage, you mentioned the salary. You know that EMBL salaries are much, much higher than the salaries you usually can pay in individual countries due to European standards. They pay European salaries, they have no taxes to pay for, etc. So salaries are pretty high in EMBL, and that makes it quite competitive. Second, I think the idea to have competition with industry is not that new. When I was young, in my field, the best competition was the Bell Labs in the US. Bell Labs was a prime place to go, being paid for by industry, and we had to compete with this. And third, we have to make sure that our own institutions are competitive. So we have to ask ourselves, I mean, me and Max Planck and anybody else, what can we offer to be competitive? In Max Planck, our answer is pretty simple. We offer our leading scientists the world a lifelong independent research without having the need to ask for funding anymore for proposals. They can do whatever they want to do for 20, 30 years, having good infrastructures. And I can say that is unsurpassed even in industry. You don't get 30 years of free research on your own, whatever you're interested in to do. So I think we all have to ask ourselves, what is our benefit in respect to others? New jobs. I feel besides Alice, we need a second initiative, which is much more aiming for industry, aiming for, let me say, small business, aiming for those people who need to use AI, but not to invent AI as new. I think Alice is a basic science initiative, but of course, the broad industry will also benefit a lot if you would know how to use AI, which does exist. And I think that is a totally different initiative, which should be developed in parallel to the basic science initiative, Alice.
Antoine, do you have any remarks in response?
Yes, quickly, because I suppose that we are out of time, and of course we could need a couple of hours to comment and answer to all Stefan and Nuria said. So very briefly, fundamental research, I'm absolutely convinced that we need, as Stefan said, a lot of fundamental research, in particular in mathematics, as he said, and probably it can be a differentiating element for Europe, and I think it's also related to Alice. How will we win the sovereignty question or address the sovereignty question? I think that the key point is that for me, all components of the Europe society must make the choice of AI. It means that science has to make the choice, but industry and society in the large, and also decision makers. And I'm not sure that it is the case today. And it's clear that if you are a scientist, a bright scientist, a smart scientist in AI, and if you have the choice to collaborate with Huawei or Google or Facebook or nobody, then it's complicated to make the choice of nobody. So it really means that we have also to develop AI in European companies in order for them to propose collaborations to scientists, and that's for me a key point. And of course, these questions of fiability, biases mentioned by Stefan are absolutely crucial. If we want to have an AI based on our values, on our history, and an AI accepted by people. Concerning briefly, a brief comment concerning the ELIS initiative, I think that ELIS is a fantastic bottom-up initiative, as it has been said. But I think now it's time to make some kind of top-down. I mean by that this initiative has, in some sense, to be, I don't know, supported by some institution. I think I fully agree with Martin, and it's now time to go to a second step. And it means that also the father and the mothers of ELIS have to accept that their child is now not so big, but big enough to have its own life, and to accept that other people take care of it, because it can be only at an institutional level. And I think that the example of EMBL is an interesting example. Perhaps it has to be adapted, because AI and biology are not exactly the same, and they don't exactly behave in the same way. But clearly, we have to do something which is clearly needed today. And concerning the talents, I said at the very beginning that I'm convinced that we need talent at every level. I mean, technicians, undergraduate, graduates. And this means also why we have to work with university, because it's really a question of education. And education, from my point of view, is important for all the specialists at different levels, but also education is important for the next generation of decision makers, and also for next generation of everybody. And once again, if we want to have an AI which is beneficial to everybody, and not, as said Moya, to a limited number of people, then education is, from my point of view, a key point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antoine. I will be very brief in my summing up. It's very clear that the questions are not easy. They have no easy solutions. Antoine pointed out the balance we have to have between regulation and operability and utility, that if you have too much regulation and you get in the way of progress and innovation, that is also not helpful. Martin pointed out one very interesting thing, which is that we must try to incorporate AI into our strengths if we want to scale up. For example, Europe has large-scale manufacturing, pharmaceutical industry, medicine, etc. And it is only by integrating AI into existing industries that we will actually be able to develop the kind of scale that will allow us to be competitive. And finally, I should say, it is of course very important to be ethical, have respect for privacy, etc. But that alone will not win the race. You can see billions of people signing up to companies, where there are very few safeguards. So I think we have to somehow compete with the best product and the most useful product. And finally, I should say, we cannot do this on a country-by-country basis, because we don't have the scale that the US and China have. And so it is a very strong argument for having Europe-wide standards, Europe-wide data interoperability, and Europe-wide collaboration. So I think I'll close there, and I want to thank my co-panelists, Martin Stratman and Antoine Petit. Thank you very much for getting together for this event. And I also want to thank the other contributors, Marta Fiatkovska, Stefan Malat, and Nuria Oliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a
Bye-bye.
pleasure. Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.